It's all about the wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs today. This is Patriots Draft Countdown presented by Bud Light. Let's do it.
With the fourth pick, the New England Patriots select.
Welcome, everybody. This is Patriots Draft Countdown presented by Bud Light. Easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the New England Patriots. And guys, just over a week until the NFL draft. We're kind of in silly season, I feel like. This is when the rumors start to come out. This is happening, this isn't happening. But for the Patriots, Paul, it's all about Shedeur Sanders. Is he going to go in the top three and push either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter down? We've been back and forth all spring with this, and it sounds like Shedeur Sanders taking some meetings with the Giants, perhaps some interest out there in him that maybe should be intriguing to the Patriots.
So you're saying there's a chance. That's all anybody wanted. And, coinciding with that, there's reports that Abdul Carter came to Foxborough and visited with the Patriots as well. So I think they're doing their due diligence. Obviously, it makes a lot of sense to know as much about those guys that you are going to have a possibility of selecting at 4. You can't just assume that prospect X is not going to be available. You have to make sure you figure out who, that you are interested in and you know as much about those guys. Abdul Carter is sort of an interesting guy. I think it'd be a no-brainer pick if he somehow slipped to 4, much like I think the rest of the panel does. But you still want to know, some of this off-field stuff that you mentioned silly season that's starting to pop up about all these guys. You want to learn as much as you can.
Yeah. How do you feel about the roller coaster with Carter this whole spring?
Silly season is right. I mean, we're at the point now where every team in the top 3 or 4 has picked everybody that they could possibly pick. The Patriots have picked 6 different guys at this point, so we'll all find out here soon enough. I think, with the Giants and Shedeur specifically, it's one of two things. Either this was their plan all along, that they were going to do some last-minute homework on the top of the quarterback class, or, as we like to say, this is when the owners tend to get involved in this process, and maybe, there's some push from upstairs to get involved at the quarterback spot. And the one thing I would just say with the Giants is, you look at last year, don't you think that there's a little bit of remorse there that they didn't draft Penix or Bo Nix or even J.J. McCarthy, even though he didn't play? I think all 3 of those guys, McCarthy maybe less so than the other 2, showed some signs of starting quarterback potential and maybe even franchise quarterback potential. So if you're the Giants, you have to be 100% sure that Shedeur Sanders is not going to be that, to pass on him for the second year in a row, to pass on the quarterback. I think is going to be tough for that regime if that's what they do. Now, with Abdul Carter, just quickly, it's a no-brainer if he's there at 4 for the Patriots. I think he's one of the best players in the draft, if not the best player in the draft. Would certainly be the cherry on top to your defense there, Deuce, and I think you'd look at a defense that's pretty complete at that point. I agree with Paul, though. There are some things with his football character that have come out, with this foot injury as well that have come out, that make a lot of sense to have him here and host him on a 30 visit, just to make sure that you get all those informations behind the scene.
Yeah, and that visit, supposedly Carter visiting the Patriots earlier this week on Monday. Matisse, break it down for me, though. Is this real? I'm sick of going back and forth on Abdul Carter. I ruled him out early in the draft process. I'm like, I'm not going to get my hopes up. But here we are, and we're still being toyed with. Is this real or is it not real?
I mean, we've been going in waves of if it's going to happen. I always said it was going to be a blessing if we get Travis Hunter or Carter. I've made my peace with Will Campbell, but I think there's a chance. It's real that there's a chance that the Patriots could end up with Abdul Carter.
What do you guys think, though, as we sit here right now, 1 week to go? What do you think is going to happen here for the Patriots? I mean, I did my final mock draft. Spoiler alert, check it out, Will Campbell. I just tried to hit it down the middle. I think it makes sense. Wasn't trying not to get crazy like Ashton Genty last time, Paul. But to me, at the end of the day, it seems like a pick that makes the most sense.
So you let Evan beat you down, is what you did.
A little bit.
With
You
Ashton
know how
Genty.
he is.
So you're saying, what do I think the Patriots are going to ultimately do? Because I do not think that Hunter and Carter, I don't think there's much of a possibility. I think the Giants are sort of putting a sign up saying we're open for business if someone wants to come up. That the situation with the Saints and Derek Carr, maybe they think that they have them in a desperate situation now. I just don't see it happening. I don't see Shedeur Sanders going in the top 3. I think Carter and Hunter will be 2, 3 in some order. I would like to see one of the Georgia defensive guys. Jalen Walker would be the guy that I would pick. But as I said earlier in the week, they do not consult me, and nor do I make the big bucks to make these decisions, so I can sit here and be wrong and not have any consequences about it.
Good track history, though, with Georgia's defensive players. I'm just saying, Paul. I
Yeah,
think they'd be all right.
absolutely.
What do you think? Yeah, what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think if you look at the top three as it stands right now, I would say it probably goes Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter in that order. And the Browns feels like they've been gravitating maybe a little bit more towards Travis Hunter versus Abdul Carter in recent weeks. And that leaves the Patriots in a spot where I feel like we all have known they will be in basically for months and have been trying to convince ourselves that maybe it's a possibility that Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter could be there for them. I look at the leveling off of the draft and just feel like all these players that you're talking about, Jalen Walker, Will Campbell, even Armand Membu or Mason Graham, they're all similar prospects in terms of talent level, and they have similar grades on them. So I feel like the need at left tackle is going to push Membu and Campbell to the top of the list. And if whichever tackle they like better, that Mike Vrabel and Elliott Wolf like better, is going to be the guy that they ultimately pick.
Makes sense.
And I understand a lot of people want to say best player available, but I can make a case for all of these guys being the best player available. So when that is the case, I would think positional value in need is going to end up being what trumps everything else. So I would say it's probably going to be Will Campbell, sneaky dark horse Armand Membu, but one of those two tackles.
You got a sneaky dark horse, Tease?
I think it's I've made my bed with Will Campbell, which isn't a bad thing. But it's a pick and a player that you can play day one, and that's a win for me in the draft. So.
Yeah. All right, well, we got a jam-packed episode here. We're talking about the wide receivers, the running backs, and tight ends, long positional preview. But first, check out Evan's film review.
What's up, everybody? It's Evan Lazar. It's the Patriots Countdown film room, and today a really exciting position for you all. I know you guys are looking forward to this one, the wide receivers in this year's NFL draft. We look at the top five. Yep, Travis Hunter, I have him as the #1 corner and the #1 receiver in this year's draft. But I also want to show you some film on Tetairoa McMillan from Arizona. Tet, really athletic, great body control, great size for the position. I love Luther Burden. I think everybody knows that. And Mecca Ibuka and Matthew Golden, two really solid receivers as well in that 20 to 40 range of this year's draft. But let's start with those top two guys. We'll break down the film on those guys a little bit here in a second. And this right here is just Travis Hunter at his absolute best. And why I think he's the best receiver in this class for two reasons: play speed, ball skills. So we're going to run the same concept on both of these examples, but we're going to run it against man and we're going to run it against zone. So up here at the top of the screen, if we can pause it here for a second, we're going to run these double posts here, and we're going to just clear out this side for Travis Hunter to come across on the crossing route, and he's going to get man-to-man coverage right there. And then what you can see is he can run away from it, and then he can go up and get it. So we're going to show this play from the end zone angle. And I want to show you how he high points the football and just his explosiveness from a vertical standpoint to go up and jump up and catch this football. So we're going to run away from the man-to-man, get him in trail, and then pause it right there. You can see those fantastic ball skills right here at the top. Just watch him go elevate for this football right over the head of the defender and bring it in with those strong hands. And then on this next play here, it's the same exact concept. So just pause it right here for a second. We're going to have the double posts here at the top, and then we're going to have the crossing route from Hunter from the isolated side. This time, though, we're going to get zone coverage. And I think an underrated part about his game, if we pause it right here, is that he has a really great feel of making himself quarterback-friendly in zone coverages. So he knows that he's going to get this clear out from the double post, and he's just going to settle in this void. And you can see Shador is running for his life, and he just finds that soft spot, and then look at the yak. Watch this move at the end. Whoop! See ya, right? That's what he brings to the table with the ball in his hands as well. You have that ability to get open against zone and then run with the football. And the next one here with Tet McMillan, a different type of receiver, not as explosive, not as dynamic. But what I think what's fun about Tet McMillan is his start-stop ability. He's got a great ability here to run these 9-stop routes with just 9 steps and then stop at the top of the route. And watch how he can break down efficiently at the top, make him respect that vertical, stop down, create that separation, and watch this. Just turn right up the field, make the defender miss for some easy yak. Now, what's fun about McMillan is that you can also move him inside. So he's a big slot or an X receiver. So we're going to move him inside on this possession, and we're just going to run the seam right up the middle of the field, and just watch the catch radius and watch the size that he can play with right there, back shoulder, seam ball, just go up and get it. So we can move him inside, we can move him outside, and then down on the goal line, here he is against Hunter at the bottom of the screen from 2023. We're just going to play him in isolation, and we're going to throw him the back shoulder fade on the goal line and watch this one-handed catch by McMillan. So you have size, you have body control, you have hands. He doesn't have that dynamic down the field speed like Travis Hunter does, but he's got a lot of really good qualities about him that are going to make him a top 10 pick. Couple of other thoughts on the rest of these guys. Luther Burden, I just love his game. Had a really good 2023 season, kind of took a step back last year. That's caused him to fall a little bit, but he is a 3-level separator, right? He can run at the first level, he can run deep, he can run with the football in his hands. He's just a burner. He gets open everywhere, has a good frame about him as well. If you want that yards after the catch, that Deebo Samuel type of player, Luther Burden reminds me a lot of him coming out of college. Matthew Golden, we all know about the 40-yard dash, ran in the 4.2s, plays to it as well. Great route runner, great speed, really separates at the top of routes. One of the best route runners in this class, and probably the best all-around wide receiver, Emeka Ibuka from Ohio State. A little bit older than some of these other guys, but he blocks well, he's tough, he goes over the middle of the field, he can run routes from multiple alignments. He just doesn't have a whole lot of flaws to his game. I wouldn't say that he's as explosive or as high-end talent as some of these other guys above him, but Ibuka is just a safe bet there. Early day, late day 1, early day 2, somewhere in there. So those are your top of the wide receiver class. It's a decent class, not like last year, not as good at the top when you had those 3 big receivers in Harrison Jr., Neighbors, and Dunze. But I still think there's a lot of talent there for the Patriots at wide receiver on days 1 and 2. I expect them to take a player at that position at some point in the top 100.
At long last, it's finally time to talk about the wide receivers, the running backs, and the tight ends. Guys, these are 3 positions we spend a lot of time talking about every single year. Each year, the positions seem to change a little bit, though. And this year, I'd say the running back class, very strong. Wide receiver, not as quite as top-heavy as we saw last year, but probably some gems in there. And then the tight end class, not as great as we certainly saw last year. I want to start off, though, with wide receiver, and I'm just going to throw Travis Hunter out there to start. I know he plays both ways, but if he was drafted by the Patriots 4th overall, he's probably going to come here and probably going to be a wide receiver out of the gate.
Obviously, you love the athleticism. You love all the intrigue around him. I can't think of a guy like him, in recent not even recent memory, any memory, a guy strictly coming into the league with this kind of versatility. I'm intrigued, like everybody else, with the idea of him committing to wide receiver and what he might be able to do. I know Evan talks about this a lot. He talked about it during the week on PU. Just how little time he gets to practice that craft. And people say, well, he's not a great route runner. Well, no kidding. He doesn't spend a whole lot of time sort of, honing that skill set. So I am intrigued by what he could be in the NFL if he were to devote his time to being a wide receiver.
Yeah. What does it look like, Evan? If he's drafted here, going to be a wide receiver, what's that process look like?
I think at first you need to have him dive 2 feet in with wide receiver and not put corner totally on the back burner, but at least focus 100% on wide receiver to start, which I think is what the plan that Mike Vrabel hypothetically laid out during the league meetings was. Let him master one side of the ball, and then once he gets to mastery level, then maybe we can start introducing the other side of the football. So if the Patriots do draft Travis Hunter, I would not expect him to come out in week 1 be playing 70 snaps on both sides of the football. I think it's going to be heavily tilted towards the one versus the other. But when I watch him play wide receiver, I just see a lot of the natural movement skills that tend to really translate to the NFL. Obviously, play speed, acceleration after the catch, ball skills, ability to change gears within the route to set up defensive backs. Like all those different types of things that he does at an extremely high level is what all the top receivers in the league do at an extremely high level. So if you have nitpicks about nuance, like that'll come, I think, over time. But he's built different. Like there's only so many people that move like that on a football field.
Yeah, T, so you're always on these wide receivers. I remember I always bring up T. Higgins, but you always really watch the wide receivers. What do you think of Hunter?
Yeah, I love Hunter. It's crazy. You remember when he flipped from Florida State to Jackson State? It's kind of crazy to see a progression go all the way through his college career, and then maybe he ends up being a Patriot. But I think so much emphasis was put on the defense during the free agency period that, let's put him at receiver, and then we can figure out what happens with the defense. I agree with Evan with that. So,
All right, well, I'm going to throw a few more names out here just at once, and you guys can jump in. I see these as kind of the first, second round guys, but the 4 guys, Tet McMillan, plenty about him, big, tall receiver, contested catch guy. Matthew Golden really had a strong year, fast, ran a 4.29. Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State, probably the most pro-ready, polished wide receiver, maybe not a standout in anything, but knows how to play, knows how to get open. And lastly, Luther Burden ran a 4.41. He's another guy that, all these guys have. What's your flavor? And Paul, I don't know, who stands out to you of this group, if any of them?
Those two, Golden and Burden, would be my preferences. I like the idea of Burden. Now, he didn't have a great year at Missouri. Evan talks about, the quarterback situation. He's 1,000% right. Saw Missouri play a couple of times. They didn't have the same kind of production that he had the previous season, but I like the idea of his ability, not just not a pure slot, but a guy who can play in the slot, a guy who can sort of play, which the one, Z?
There you go.
There you go. Ball knower.
Flanker.
Yeah, that kind of versatility, athleticism. I like Luther Burden a little bit, and I know that he's sort of falling a little, and that's why I've been watching him. There's some character concerns off, how much he loves football, how much he wants to compete, and all that. So that sort of drops into that second round category. I'm interested in that. Obviously, Golden ran the unbelievable 40 time at the combine. I don't think he'll still be there in the second round, but Burden is a guy that might be.
Yeah, maybe Burden falls, but the other guys maybe in that, as we call it, the donut between the Patriots first and second pick.
Yeah, I've always loved Luther Burden. I think Luther Burden to me is the third best receiver in the class. I have a first round grade on Luther Burden. I think his year in 2023, you really have to go back and watch the year in 2023 when he was more consistent and the play around him was more consistent. And I just look at the way that he can really challenge the defense at all 3 levels. You can throw catch and run targets at him, quick hitters over the middle, and have him run with the football. You can also have him, separate over the top. He's really good at double moves, deep crossers, things like that. So he's a complete receiver for that type of receiver, that archetype, that slot receiver mold. I see a little Debo in there. I know he gets a lot of Debo Samuel comparisons, but I think he's a better downfield route runner coming into the league than Debo was. So I've compared him a lot to Zay Flowers, throughout this entire process. And I just think that those two guys kind of in a similar mold, but win differently at the same time. And I could see him in that category. Just quickly on Matthew Golden, he doesn't really play to that time speed. Now, he'll tell you that he wasn't asked to play to that time speed, so I guess maybe that's a little bit of a, hidden talent of his potentially, but I don't think he plays to 4.28, 4.29, but he's a very good route runner, very angular, very good out of the top of the route, very good hands at the catch point as well. There have been, and I know he's on the Patriots now, so it's fun to say, there have been some Stephon Diggs comparisons with Matthew Golden, and I could definitely see that, but that's more of a intermediate route runner than really a true deep threat route runner that might every once in a while, have that in his back pocket, but isn't his calling card or his carrying trait.
I would just say, on the field, he was in and out of games in the playoffs, and there was an enormous difference in the Texas offense when he was off the field. I'm thinking of the Arizona State game in particular. They were doing whatever they wanted offensively. I think he left that game for a period of time, and that's when Arizona State made the run. So he's a guy who definitely made a big impact on his offense.
Two really opposite, career arcs for Bird and Golden. Golden's the early breakout guy, his true sophomore breakout. Golden had, all of his production is really in, 4 games, but they all came on the biggest stage in the college football playoff.
Yeah, what stands out to you, T, for those top guys?
Well, listen, I like Emeka Egbuka. Just think about all the great receivers that have come from Ohio State. And, Evan, correct me if I'm wrong, he has the record for receptions or yards,
he was there for 5 years.
Yeah. But fair, that's a great receiver that's being
I don't love him.
Don't love him. But I think if he could maybe
Paul's
fall
my
into that
kinda guy.
late first round, maybe early second round, that'd be a good shot there. Also want to talk about maybe a bit later Kyle Williams and Isaiah Bond, just two fast guys.
You're killing me,
We're gonna get to that.
No, but Kyle Williams is one that stands out to me too. Just not the greatest route runner, but he's very fast. Get the ball in his hands, see what happens.
Yeah, you stole my thunder there a little bit, Tease, because I was going to talk about 3 guys a little bit later down, and we can skip around a little bit. Please bring up Jaden Higgins, Jack Besh if you guys want, but I just going to throw out Jalen Knoll, Isaiah Bond, and Kyle Williams, 3 guys who can all run, who are all fast, and that's what I think personally I want to see out of this draft is get maybe a day 3 guy, not day 3, third round kind of guy, somewhere in that range. Doesn't have to be a high round guy, but just to bring an element of speed to this team. I've been all over, Isaiah Bond since early. I know he was at Texas, with Golden, and it hasn't quite lived up to that potential. But all these guys are
big-time recruit, though.
Yeah,
absolutely. There's talent there.
Alabama guy, ran a 4.37. Noel ran a 4.39. Kyle Williams not too far behind with a 4.40. So for me, when I look at this wide receiver roster right now, those are the kind of guys that I'm intrigued in. Doesn't have to be a high-round pick. I think those high-round picks need to go towards offensive tackle and defensive end. But I think when we get to day 3, those are 3 guys that jump out to me as guys who have some speed. I don't know, Paul, you have a comment on those guys, or you have somebody else you want to
Higgins is my, because I like the guys on the outside. I think that at some point, we talk a lot about left tackle, and rightly so, about kicking the can down. They have not had that kind of guy in a while, the bigger guy. I'm a little intrigued by him. Obviously there's flaws. He's not a first-round projection, so there's problems with his game, and there's going to be problems with these kinds of guys. Not probably as fast as what the guys.
Yeah, he's a
certainly not as shifty as some of those smaller guys. But I think they have enough of the smaller guys. I'm looking for some size.
Yeah, Jaden Higgins, his issues really are with speed and with separation down the field. I compared him to like Michael Pittman Jr. with the Colts, where he's going to really be like a big possession receiver. You're not going to really get a ton of downfield stretch with him, but you're going to have those first and second level wins. Like he's really good at running slants, in cuts, finding soft spots in zone coverage, like that sort of thing. That's why a lot of people project him to maybe move inside and play like a big slot role instead of a pure outside guy at the next level. Kyle Williams is interesting. He can play a little bit on the outside, and he can stack over the top on go routes. So you see some of that release quickness and that ability off the line of scrimmage, certainly with him. He's got good play speed, really good with the football in his hands if you want to scheme touches for him and things like that. He's been someone that's I would put in kind of like the late riser category. He's 23 years old. He had a little bit of a late breakout. And has just kind of steadily climbed up the media boards, at least during the draft process. But when we get into that Kyle Williams mold, it's kind of like a day 2 stack to me of, Jalen Noel, Kyle Williams, Isaiah Bond, and then Jalen Royals from Utah State. All 4 of those guys are kind of the same type of receiver. It's just a flavor thing of which one you prefer. I'm a Noel guy, Jalen Noel from Iowa State. I think he reminds me a ton of Tyler Lockett, speed slot receiver, a really good separator, really good technician, but he has the speed to push it down the field. But if you had Kyle Williams as your guy in that stack, like it's pretty clustered together, so I wouldn't be too mad about that. But those 4 guys, if that what Deuce was describing, and I agree, just looking at the way they've moved throughout this process too with the Patriots, it does seem like they're trying to get separators, which I think is good. Like I think they are kind of trying to get away from the Jalen Polk archetype maybe a little bit and get guys that can really get open at the top of the route and down the field, and all 4 of those guys would fit that category.
I'm just going to jump in real quick before I go to UT's, just because Jack Besh and Xavier Restrepo, I know Restrepo ran a 4.85 down at his pro day, not good, dropped his status. Those are the guys I'm struggling a little bit with, because I think I look at their personalities and they're tough and they make catches and they seem like Vrabel kind of a guys. But I don't think this is what this team needs right now. We got a bunch of those kind of guys. So I respect how those guys play. And you can't, of course, Jack Besh's story with his brother passing away is, and then the performance he had in the Senior Bowl catching the last touchdown. Great performance. And, you love how Restrepo, I loved him at the combine too, just the way he talked about the studying and the time he puts in. But for me, I'm leaning more towards those speed guys.
Yeah, I agree with you, Deuce. Restrepo dropped down a little for me. I like Tez Johnson also, and then some really late round guys. Jimmy Horn Jr. from Colorado. I'm a Coach Prime guy, but fast guy there. Also want to throw out Rock Taylor. He was in my NCAA season, of course, but no, he's just a prototypical outside receiver. Good hands, can make a big play. So that might be like, a 7th round pick guy.
Yeah, I have a tough time, like you mentioned, with, Betch and Aliko Alamoner, Tez, Tez Harris. Like those guys, like I don't know if they're going to really bring like the game breaking element that this team needs. Like I feel like the Patriots need some special movers on the offensive side of the ball. Like
preach.
Some real separators, some real speed to that position. Like some people think Betch is going to be like a flex tight end at the next level. I kind of thought of him as sort of like a Jawan Jennings type, right? Like that kind of receiver. Manor, same thing. Like he's thicker and he's got a really good, play strength to him, and he's got some explosiveness, but he's not speed. He's not fast down the field. And I think they're going to try to get some more of those guys. So just a couple of those guys on later in the draft, day 3. I mean, I've talked about Dante Thornton a lot from Tennessee. I like to call him the Joe Milton of wide receivers. Like he's one of those guys that if you just looked at the raw data and the measurables, you'd be like, how is this guy not like DK Metcalf good? Like he's a freak. He's like 6'4", 205. 4.3 40-yard dash, just looks the part coming off the bus. But then you look at the box score and he's got like 1 catch for 50 yards, and you're just like, all right, well, but he's really good at that one thing. He's got one really good thing, vertical speed and game-breaking speed, and he's really good there. If you want more of like the Patriot type, the McDaniels type, Isaac Tesla from Arkansas reminds me a ton of like a little bit more souped up Jacoby Myers, right? He maybe has a little bit more burst and a little bit more speed, but he's that guy that's going to play a lot inside and just be reliable for you in that spot. So if they're looking for that sort of Patriot old school archetype, you have Restrepo, you have him, like those are those types of guys.
Anybody else, Paul, that stood out to you?
I can't believe you haven't brought up Nick Nash.
Why?
That just seems like a Mike Dussault special
Really?
right there. Jake
look,
Bobo,
Yeah.
That's true.
Where do you think
Kyle Phillips.
where do you think the receiver pick would happen? Like, I feel like if it's not in the second, it could
One of those
drop
2
to the-
third-rounders. One of those 2
You
third-rounders.
think one of the third rounders will?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
I like that,
to me
Mike.
the sweet spot. They got 2 third-rounders. There's usually a guy hanging around there. I mentioned the group that I like, but yeah, let's move on then.
Just one real
yeah,
quick on the
please.
receivers, like on that note, I think this receiver class has kind of gotten a little bit of a bad rap. Like it doesn't have the top end talent that last year did. There's no Marvin Harrison Jr., there's no Malik Neighbors in this class. But to Deuce's point, the day 2 talent, like if you just want to find a guy that can be a starting receiver and like the number 2 or a number 3 receiver, I think there's a lot of that in this draft, and it's kind of gets meaty there. I mean, we just rattled off probably 10 names of guys that fit that type. So don't like totally sleep on this class. I feel like it's gotten a lot of crap because it doesn't have those like blue chip prospects at the top.
Well, one class that hasn't really gotten a lot of crap is the running back class, which we'll move on to now. And I would qualify this as maybe a questionable need. We've heard a lot of talk throughout the spring from Mike Vrabel, from Robert Kraft, that they're intrigued by this class. They'd like to add a back with some speed. I find myself, I can't get a beat on this class. I've looked at a lot of these guys a bunch of times, and I think I just have a blind spot for evaluating running backs, maybe because they all look pretty good to me. Maybe that's why I picked Ashton Genty in one of my mock drafts and made everybody very mad. But look, when we get into this process of watching prospects every year, I really enjoyed watching Ashton Genty. Now, is he the right pick for the Patriots? Is that probably not, but when I look at the draft process as a whole, when you have to sit down and watch guys play, I hadn't have a better time watching anybody than watching Ashton Genty just run through guys, and it got even better at his pro day where he looked like a mini Hulk out there. So he's the cream of the class, Paul. And after that, there are some good players, but let's allow ourselves to imagine what kind of player he's going to be in the pros. I mean, some questions, of course, come from
Genty?
State. Genty.
Saying, yeah, no, I think he'll be terrific, and I think he can catch the ball. And you brought up when you caused all the commotion in the first place, you brought up LT, and I don't think that you're alone. I think people look at that kind of versatility. I just think it's too high. It's too valuable of a pick to use. But I don't. Do you guys have any doubt that he'll be a productive player in the NFL? I think he will be.
No, I think it's just a question for me of how long. Like, how long is he going to
A lot
have
of wear and tear.
the shelf life for? He has a little bit of wear and tear. He carried that offense at Boise State. I think that the biggest thing, I don't really see LaDainian Tomlinson with him, because LaDainian Tomlinson to me was a difference-making pass catcher as well, and I don't know if Genty at 5'8" with that catch radius and with his just kind of lower center of gravity and skill set is really going to be a guy that you're going to be moving around the formation as a receiver and trying to feed the ball to, like the Chargers did with LaDainian Tomlinson. So the comp that I've kind of come to with him is a better version of Maurice Jones-Drew, low center of gravity, explosive bowling ball type of running back. He's got great, probably some of the best contact balance that you'll ever see in a running back that just bounces off tackles, runs through tackles, runs around tackles, just a constant tackle breaking machine. I think he had something like 162 forced missed tackles last year at Boise State.
I think he was almost at 2,000 yards after contact.
Yeah.
Absurd.
Yeah, so he's absolutely a blue chip prospect and extremely talented. No doubt.
Here's a question though. Like, we say 4 is too high. If we were at 7, like, is that a serious consideration there?
I mean, is Membo still there? Is Will Campbell still there? But I think, and we'll get to the tight ends in a second. I think Tyler Warren is probably worthy of that conversation as well. But as we get down here the list, and as we said, it's a very strong class. We've heard all spring that there are going to be guys drafted throughout all 3 days of the draft, where you'll have contributors come in at running back. Omarion Hampton, probably the second guy. Saw comp to him. James Conner seemed about right to me, and I just throw the 2 Ohio State guys out there, Henderson and Judkins.
Yeah.
Some really good
I
options.
can run,
probably
too. Like, Hampton's got good size and speed. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's some intriguing prospects. I'm looking more for the old school. Josh McDaniels is back. I'm looking for those Shane Vereen, James White types.
Yeah.
Probably a little bit further down. But these guys, I mean, the 2 Ohio State guys in Hampton, I think these guys are all good players.
I want to talk about that as well, Paul. Chris and I did a joint mock, and we were kind of between Devin Neal and DJ Giddens. DJ Giddens fits more in the receiving back role, but just very shifty. I haven't given up hope on Ramondre yet, so you pair him, Giddens with Ramondre.
Devin Neal's a football player.
Yeah.
He can play.
Yeah, I think, when you start to get into day 2 with the running backs, it's what kind of running back do you want to draft? Because there really are a lot of different buckets that you can put them into. Do you want the early down Devin Neal type of running back that's going to be sort of like a lead, bell cow type, or are you looking for that Shane Vereen, James White receiving back, which we can get to some of those names. I'm a big fan of Travion Henderson from Ohio State. I just feel like he's a little bit like Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, he's going to have that kind of game speed and that kind of big playability. Judkins runs angrier and runs with a little bit more power and force. But Henderson is the explosive machine. He's the big play machine. And then you start to get into the Giddens and the Neals and all that, Scattaboo even. Like, you get into that tier. Those guys are like early down guys. Those guys are going to be first and second down running backs. I tend to think they're going to go more towards the speed guys. You look at the cluster of those backs maybe on early day 3. Brashard Smith from SMU, Woody Marks from USC,
yeah.
LaQuint Allen from Syracuse, and Jaden Blue from Texas. To me, are like the 4th or 5th round sweet spot of receiving backs.
I do like Jaden Blue.
Yeah, he fumbles a lot and he drops a lot of passes. So his hands aren't great.
Got to take the good with the bad.
But my goodness, can that dude run? Right?
Home run hitter.
Yeah.
Absolute home run hitter.
Yeah. So, watching him, like, linebackers, like, try to cover him on wheel routes is, like, good luck with that, So he's got speed. Brashard Smith's a converted wide receiver, played wide receiver earlier on in his career, and then moved to running back at SMU, so he can run routes as a receiver and with great ball skills. Woody Marks is kind of like a little Deion Lewis type, right? A little scat back that's got good lower body strength and good jukes, get on the juke stick and all that kind of stuff. LaQuint Allen's reminds me a little bit of James White, more smooth, quick than fast, good blocker. I see a little bit of that. Like, he's probably not a game breaker in terms of the speed, but he's got that ability to get open at the top of routes.
Yeah. I just got to get Damian Martinez in there. He's another one I enjoy watching from Miami. Tackle breaker, chain mover kind of guy, runs hard. Those are my style. I'm with you guys, though. I find myself wondering, what are they looking for? Are they looking for an all-around back? Do we want to go back to having a big back and a catching back? Hard to say.
I mean, you see all these teams, a running back goes down, and they're able to just plug and play somebody. But also, Ollie Gordon, Oklahoma State, 13 touchdowns, 880 yards.
Good player.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He got a little boxed in 24 because they weren't as good team, but his 23 tape was really good. So that'd be another player.
But he basically was the offense.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and I know Evan talks about the workload with some of those guys, but when you're the focal point, that's why Genty, I think, was so impressive. When you're the focal point and you still find a way to crank out 100-yard game after 100-yard game, there's something to be said from that. You're not sneaking up on anybody. You're not taking advantage of light boxes. Everybody is geared to stopping you, and you still produce. Those are the guys that can play.
Yeah, Ollie Gordon, if they're going to go for that early down running back, I think Ollie Gordon might be their guy somewhere in the 4th round. Would make sense for him. Damian Martinez is another one of those guys in that mold.
Yeah, the couple of guys that I like that probably too rich for the Patriots, like Dylan Sampson, Jordan James. I just probably too early because you guys are right. It's probably going to be a day 3.
I think
running back.
Jordan James will probably go a little bit later.
Yeah, I just like those Oregon guys. I don't know.
Yep.
It might be, one of those things. It's kind of an irrational, earlier when we were talking about wide receivers, Tease brought up, the Ohio State guys, and they've hit, it's like those little guys from Oregon seem to be good players.
Yeah.
And
Bucky Irving.
yeah,
last year,
they're not all the most, physically, they're not going to, be the most imposing guys, but they find a way to produce. Yeah. And I've watched Jordan James a little bit. I think he could do some of those things in the Josh McDaniels offense.
Yeah, I think he could be available on day 3, honestly, and be there for them. Dylan Sampson's one of my draft crushes out of this running back class. I love him. I think he might go right between pick 38 and pick 69, and I just don't know how the Patriots are going to...
That's the second donut?
Yes, the second donut. Exactly. How
we're familiar with on the
gonna-
pre- and post-game show.
Yeah, how they're going to figure that out.
Not anymore.
Good joke. But he's awesome, and really good runner. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Brian Westbrook back in the day.
Oh, good.
Good shifty runner. But
One of my all-time favorites.
but he's what I like so much about him is that he's really efficient. Like, he's not just trying to dance to dance. Like, he makes a cut and then it's up the field, right? And it's really efficient on the tracks. They don't really throw to their running backs much, Alvin Kamara. So, like, when you get to the league, I think he's going to be able to catch more passes than he did at Tennessee. I just don't know if the Patriots are going to be in a spot to take him, but they met with him throughout this process, and I think he'll definitely be on their board.
Yeah, well, if I had to place a bet, I would say the Patriots are going to draft a running back. I think we just rattled off about 20 names. It felt like that all
it
have
won't be
some
any
kind
of those.
intrigue. So place your bets now. Running back probably going to get taken. And that leads us to our final positional preview here of the spring. It's the tight end position. Last year, I remember we're so all about the tight ends. It was a great class. 2 years ago, it felt like it was a great class. There's always feels like
This is a pretty good
it's
class.
a pretty solid class right now. And I think for me, I wonder, where are the Patriots? We brought back Aston Hooper, have Hunter Henry, 2 veterans there. Last year you brought in Jaheim Bell as well, developing behind the scenes. You've got Jack Westover. Some of the, it's you got a bunch of names in there. Do any of these guys intrigue them enough? Probably, again, and probably not at the top with Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland. Loveland with some injury issues, but Tyler Warren in a perfect world, he seems like an ideal kind of Patriot. And do it all tight end, brings a little swag to it. If you watch college football, which even I did this year, you couldn't miss him. He was outstanding.
Yeah, he does a lot of things well. I've talked to some people that are familiar with the program, as you know, and they rave about him. He's just one of those guys that just always wants to get better. He does a lot of different things. Even played some quarterback. Obviously, those are things that you're not necessarily going to ask him to do.
Smart though
in the NFL, but it speaks to his versatility as an athlete. I'm not saying that I would take him with the 4th overall pick, but I think he's in whatever you want to say, a dozen players that you put him in a bucket, and depending on what you need, you might say Will Campbell, you might say Jalen Walker, you might say Tyler Warren. Yeah. He's that good.
Yeah, he's probably one of the cleanest prospects in the draft, period. Just on the field, off the field, work ethic, but also just the prospect himself. He does a lot of things really, really well, and it kind of gives him like a nice floor of this is going to be a starting tight end in the NFL. Do I think he's going to be Gronk or Travis Kelce? Or maybe not, but he's going to be a starting tight end in the league. And I think the best thing that he does to me, though, is his versatility and his ability to move around the formation. And those guys are interesting, but they're also, you have to have a plan, of how exactly we're going to make this guy a focal point of the offense. But certainly he carried Penn State's offense on his back last year. He was the focal point there. I like that. I like that he's already had that on his plate. At that position, it's not always that way in college football. They often underutilize the tight end, but he was the offense at Penn State, so he knows what it's like to have to be the number one guy. I would say that in terms of his receiving ability, he's got that Gronk to him where he can just be a center on the basketball team and just out-muscle you, whether it's at the catch point, in the red zone, run people over after the catch. He's a physical guy. He can do those types of things. He's got a little bit of burst in his routes, probably not as much as Colston Loveland, but has a little bit of that too. But I'd say the best trait that he has is that he's just a beast. He's 6'6", 255 pounds. He can block. He's a very good all-around player.
What do you think, Tisa? You got anything on Loveland?
Not much on Loveland actually, but I have
No
Gunnar.
love?
No love for Loveland. But talking about the tight ends, Chris and I in our joint mock, we'd had Gunnar Helm in the 5th, just kind of a all around tight end. Evan had a Hunter Henry comp there. Yeah. I don't think the Patriots are going to take a tight end too early, so maybe that 5th round is the sweet spot.
A lot of athletes in this
Yeah.
class. I mean, Mason Taylor, of course, we know great genes for him. Look like a
Yeah, he's a good player.
you know, running
Yeah.
a combine. I know he's kind of underutilized a little bit at LSU, a little bit of a projection there. Just throwing a few names out there. Elijah Arroyo coming off an ACL. Harold Fannin Jr. is another one I like. Just, 1,500 yards, 10 TDs this year, but all athletic guys. I mean, it seems, and that's where I think I struggle a little bit with, like, who do you get? I mean, are you going to draft in the day 2, day 3, a tight end weapon good enough to knock Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper down? Hard to see that projection. That's why I'm a little bit lower on this overall class for the Patriots.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think it's a good tight end class. Certainly those two guys at the top are really good prospects. And we didn't talk a ton about Loveland. He's definitely in the donut, right? Like, he's definitely right there in the first round donut. But he's probably the closest thing to Brock Bowers in this draft in terms of the play speed and the dynamic route running ability. But he had the injury. He doesn't have the production that Tyler Warren had, but he's younger and he's faster, and he's more dynamic. So if there are teams out there that have Colson Loveland as the number 1 tight end over Tyler Warren, I won't be surprised at all. Like, I think there's definitely a case to be made. But to your point about athletes, like, that's typically what translates at the position to the league is the raw athletes. It's one of those positions where, like, things like the combine is still holding up in terms of translation. So, Terrence Ferguson from Oregon had a great combine, had good college production, was used more of as a safety valve at Oregon than a downfield receiver, but you think there might be some untapped potential there. Elijah Arroyo, same thing. Can't really block, but can run routes and can make plays down the field as a receiver. And then Gunnar Helm, I comp to Henry because he's kind of more of like that old school, just crafty, good at the top of the route, uses his body well, uses his physicality well, can run the seam, but probably not his best thing, but he can do it. Blocking can do it. Not his best thing, but he can do it. I think that Gunnar Helm's going to be a quarterback's best friend. He's going to be very quarterback friendly, big target in the middle of the field, and he'll help you move the chains. Those other guys may be a little bit more explosive, but if I had to pick one of these guys out of this group, if you want to go upside, I'd probably say Ferguson has the highest ceiling just because of the athletic profile, but Helm is probably the steadiest. Like, he's probably the easiest to project.
Yeah. Well, anybody else you got?
I got Luke Lachey. You just got to shout out all the Iowa tight ends. I mean, it's a great program for that.
You'd be wrong to overlook them.
Yeah.
And, another, the NFL name, right?
Yep.
And Aronde Gadsden, same kind of thing at Syracuse. You always look for that. We talked about Mason Taylor with the bloodlines. There's a lot of bloodlines at that position.
Yep.
Tight ends.
Tight ends, who knew? But I agree with you, Mike, in terms of for the Patriots. I don't think when you have Hunter Henry and then you re-sign Hooper, you're more than likely, forget the donut, you're more than likely not really interested in drafting that position unless it's like a day 3 flyer.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things, the way the board plays out too. Like, if a Gunnar Helm is there and that's the best player, why
Maybe
not?
it makes sense.
Yeah.
Jaheim Bell too, offering, just give him some time to develop.
Yeah.
I don't know, an athletic guy.
It's tough to I've kind of cooled off on the tight ends a little bit for the Patriots because of the reasons that Paul brought up. Like, it's already a position that's slow to develop as it is, and you have 2 really steady veterans in Henry and Hooper. So, like, if you're a team like the Patriots, you want your early picks to play. Like, you want those guys to have a path to the field and to play early and to contribute early. And as good as, as appealing as some of these names are at tight end, like, if you draft Mason Taylor, who I think might be a really good player 2 to 3 years from now, like, you're not really in a position as the Patriots to wait around for your draft pick in the top 100 to make an impact. Like, you need guys to come in that can help you today, right now. And I just don't know if this group necessarily is going to do that for them unless they go like Warren, in the first round, if they're going to really have that out of the group. So are you willing to just use a pick on a stash? Like, are you willing to stash a Terrence Ferguson and develop him? Are you willing to stash Mason Taylor, a younger prospect, and develop him, and then kind of pass on having a top 100 pick play as a rookie? I don't know if that's necessarily the best use of that asset.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of Patriots Draft Countdown presented by Bud Light. Just 1 week to go until the NFL draft, but don't worry, we're going to be back with one more live episode day of the draft, 1 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be here, wrap things up, maybe do a mock draft, have a little fun trying to pass the time before the draft that night. So we'll catch you then.